Welcome back to Editor's Lounge. We're at Key Code Media in Burbank, and our wonderful panelists, Mark Raudonis, Terence Curren, Zack Arnold, Bernie Laramie, and Carsten Kurpanek, right? And I'm Debra Kaufman, your moderator. So we spent a lot of time talking about technology. I had a really interesting question at the break, which was, when are we going to start talking about what we're going to see at NAB?
I thought we were getting away with it.
And my response was, I think that's what we just did.
I told Terry last year and the year before we should stop billing this thing as what you're going to see at NAB. Because who knows what we're going to see at NAB, but this conversation is more interesting than the next camera or the next lighting thing or the next microphone. So the answer is, never.
Back when we started, it was pre-NAB because it was what's going to go on at NAB, and then afterwards, whatever the big announcement was at NAB, you know, they'd usually do the next Editor's Lounge. That has changed because of the internet. I mean, everything, you know everything ahead of time.
There's no surprise anymore.
Do we even need an NAB? Is that,
well,
you know,
for the parties.
You know what?
And the face-to-face, seeing people.
Yeah, there's three good parts.
Parties.
One is the face-to-face. Two is the, well, okay.
You're not going to take the brochures home in the sack anymore.
No, that's true. Haven't done that for years.
But there's a lot of stuff that you can't easily see hands-on unless you go there, you know. And for us, it's a little different because in LA, all the manufacturers will come out here and show it, you know. But if you're in Wyoming, you know, how are you going to see a Grass Valley switcher?
Right.
Do they still exist?
They still make switchers?
We have no idea what we're going to see at NAB, but I think we've talked about some of the trends that we're going to see people trying to create a 4K workflow. We're going to see more 4K cameras. We're going to see the latest versions of high dynamic range.
The other good thing about NAB is the little booths in the back that you stumble across. You find something that otherwise you never would have seen or heard from because they don't have the marketing budget to get out there.
Some of the conferences can be really cool. You can hear some really interesting people talk. We're going to talk a lot now about the business of being an editor. I don't know how many of you are aware of that class action suit against 20th Century Fox brought by a couple of interns on Black Swan who were not paid. And so they brought Fox to court and the judge ruled against Fox. Has that had a chilling effect on people hiring interns?
Yes, absolutely. Last year we had something like 23 interns. And this year, I'm not sure if we're going to do the program. We're a target. Everyone's a target. So it's unfortunate. At BMP, I do not think that we're guilty of the kind of things that were going on other places, but anybody can sue anybody for anything. So at a certain point, it's not worth the risk. Now, there are alternatives to that, which is pay, which we're going to do, and also the TV Academy has a wonderful program. It's a national contest, national competition for people across the country to apply for internships within the industry. And the Academy pays a stipend equal to about minimum wage. They do background checks on them, and you know that the person that you're getting has won a competition, so they're really good. We've had multiple people over the years that has been a great experience for. But the idea that you're going to get cheap, free labor, I think is abusive, and I understand why that has happened, but it's unfortunate because it cuts both ways. So there's opportunities that are now lost for people that used to have these chances to interact with high-level talent in Hollywood, and now that talent is going to say, I don't want to touch this with a 10-foot pole.
Although, you know, you wonder what percentage of those were the good internship jobs and which percentage were just the jobs picking up people's dry cleaning.
I don't know, but the point is that all of them now are going to go away because any lawyer in town is going to say, don't do it.
Anybody on this panel, anybody an intern here?
I was 5 years.
I would not be here without pay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
But P.S., I got paid minimum wage. But that meant that I did not have to do a burger flipping job in the summer because I made the money as an intern.
How many people in the audience have worked as an intern at some point in their career? Oh, pretty much everybody.
This is a big topic for me in a way. I run the American Cinema Editors Internship now. And obviously, I started as a free intern with Terry, who gave me my start. I came from Germany, just college. I had no idea about two pubs, and it was important because I didn't have a value for the employer at that point. I needed to know things. I needed to meet people, and I needed to know things, and I needed to absorb that knowledge. And the least I could do is answer phones and clean up some days. The thing is, I wasn't doing that for 3 years. You have control over your life. If they were interns on Black Swan for a year and a half doing that entire production and did nothing.
They were exploited.
They were exploited. That's definitely a problem, but it doesn't really happen in that regard in our world that much, but we feel the effect of the lawsuit now.
How is it impacting you?
With the American Cinema Editors Internship, we also pay a stipend now because of that. Because when we send interns, this year we had someone at Mockingjay, and we had someone at Finest Hour, and basically these HR departments now, they require either college credit or being paid. They just don't take interns anymore. So it was usually pretty lax, and when I was an intern, some editor we know sits in that editorial seat, they say, come over, here's the post super, no one really cared. Now everybody cares.
Yep.
So it became stricter. We used to have an international program, and we can't do that anymore because international interns cannot be paid. They're on tourist visas, so it's not possible to do that. But I think, personally, you're in control of your life. You know, if you know that you're being exploited on a show for working for a year for free in accounting, and you're just doing that, people ask me, it's like, you know, you intern for 3 months, 4 months, and then you have to make a decision. And if you have a good relationship with the person you're interning with, you should have proven your worth at this point. And if there is no opportunity, then you need to move on. You at least have a new credit on your resume, and you part mutually friendly. Don't burn bridges, and if you did prove your worth, you get hired. I did get hired as a night assistant then after my internship was over with Terry. So I believe in that too.
So does anybody have a positive thing to say about where we're at with the intern? I mean, is this a good thing at all, or is it mainly just a chilling, dampening effect?
No, it's changing, and free is no longer possible. I think the process is still valid. Everything you were just talking about is the same thing. One other point is because the law says you cannot work for free, a lot of what we do can't be done in a day. It takes place over a week, over 2 weeks, over a month. So I can't give an intern who's going to show up on a Monday, Wednesday, and Friday an assignment or a task to complete that's longer than a day's work. It's just not going to get it done. But if you're paying them, they can show up Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and therefore the kind of experience that they're going to have is going to be much better than if they were just observing for free. I can give them something valid to work on. I can have them do something that's productive for both them and me. This free is no longer possible.
Probably.
I don't think it's always a good thing, though, and I'm not disagreeing with
Okay.
to play the devil's advocate. I was a hustler when I was in high school and college, and
Like Sunset Boulevard type of
yes.
Tell us more.
I would go into companies, total cold call to some dumb college kid and say, I'll spend the entire summer here and do whatever you want, and I'll do it for free, and all I want to do is learn. That's it. Yeah. And people like me that have that desire to learn will not have that opportunity because there's so much red tape and so much structure. The reason that I can do graphic design and I know After Effects is I spent an entire summer doing a free job at a graphic design firm because I said, this is a skill that I want. And I walked in the door and said, what if I just sat in the corner and I got your lunches and I did whatever you wanted to, but when I'm free, you guys show me how to use After Effects. And to this day, 15 years later, that's a skill that I still possess that is far and above the skills that a lot of editors that I work with have, because I walked in there and said, I'll do whatever you want for free, and people can't do that anymore. So do I think people should be exploited? Absolutely not. I wanted to be exploited, because that's how I learned. That's how I got knowledge. So it does close some doors.
On the other hand, now you have YouTube videos too.
Yeah, so that is very true, where I was in a different generation, where I couldn't sit down and learn everything on my own, but there's still something to be said to be learning with a professional in the room and say, why isn't this working? And they can show you and show you a real-world application.
You combine that with the disappearing relationship between assistant editors and editors.
Well, that's actually, that was my
next.
next.
There's not a lot of learning opportunities.
That was my next point. I mean, it used to be in the old days that you would work in the same room and you'd be able to watch the editor, and the editor would give you an opportunity to cut something.
Right.
And now assistants don't even work in the same room. How are assistant editors rising up in the world?
Yeah,
How
I
are
could speak
people
to
learning?
that. At Bunim Murray, one of our core values is promoting from within. And we have a lot of programs in place to train people. I run this program called the Post Knowledge Series. It's an opportunity for people to learn what they need to know about workflow, about things and all that. And every week it's a different agenda because the workflows change. But for us, we take that process very seriously, and we think that everybody who we hire as an assistant is an editor in training or an editor in waiting. It's somebody that you're not going to get in the door unless we believe that you have the potential to edit. So we're doing our best to break that sort of deterioration. But this is also reality. It's not features, it's not scripted, where we employ a lot more people. So the numbers are such that we have to do that.
Well, how is it happening in the world of TV and features? I mean, Zach, do you have any?
Yeah,
what do you
I
see?
think that a lot of it now rests upon the shoulders of the assistant and being somewhat, I don't want to use the word aggressive, but just being ambitious. When I'm looking at hiring an assistant editor, there's kind of two types of assistants in the feature world and the scripted TV world. There are career assistants, and then there are people that don't want to be assistants that are young and hungry and want to be editors. And 10 times out of 10, I will hire somebody young and passionate that knows nothing, as opposed to somebody that knows all the workflow, knows all the bells and whistles, but they're just kind of there to do those things, because I want somebody that's coming into the room and saying, how did you cut that scene, and why did you make that decision, and can I sit on the couch with you? And at the end of the day, what I tell somebody if they want to move up is that first you have to be an awesome assistant, and then you need to make it very clear that you don't want to be an assistant. And then they're going to say, well, you're really good at your job, and I know you want to move up, so I'm going to help you do that. But if you're somebody, and I hate working with assistants that make it very clear, I want to be an editor, but they won't be an assistant, because they're like, well, can I cut some scenes? They're like, no, but I have 6 bins that need to be organized, and we need to label these outputs. They're like, but do you have anything to cut? It's like, you can cut stuff when you show me you can do your job first, right? So I'm looking for people that are passionate first.
Which leads to, I actually preferred to have the career assistant. Because I've gotten pretty tired of the, but what I really want to do is cut. But what we really need is make the VFX list or to do whatever else those assistant choices
Well, Zach, I have a question.
And very well by
I have a question for you. Have you created relationships with assistants that you've tried to bring up?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'm always trying to bring people up. I ran a small post facility for a few years, doing mostly independent stuff and doing trailers before I got on Burn Notice. And that was the whole idea, was for it to be a training ground for young people to come in. They started as assistants. I let them take over as editors, and I would oversee as a supervising editor. And I've now taken that into this world where now they're just at the next level assisting on big shows, but they're in the position to be able to move up and be on bigger stuff as editors, or editing things that are slightly at a lower level where they're cutting rather than assisting at a high level. But I'm a big believer in getting people to help them move up. But then there's the part of me that's really selfish, where I just want my good assistant forever. And I tell her, you're not allowed to move up. You can't do it because I don't want to replace you.
There's
That's
the
the problem.
assistant when you go, you're really good at what you do and you like doing that and you want to be that. And with the complexity that Mark is referring to in the workflows, it's now that much more difficult to be a really good assistant. If you really have them and they want to be that, that's pretty
everything's
exceptional.
becoming more automated. So it's just one button. So we're getting to the point.
We have another editor sitting here, so Carsten, I want to hear from you.
I did the switch like 2.5 years ago. My last movie, big movie, was World War Z, basically. And the movie ended on Friday, and on Monday I was cutting my first indie movie. And once you taste the blood, it's not that I didn't assist, because on all those indie movies that I worked afterwards, obviously you assist sort of yourself. It's hard in features to move up because obviously there's fewer jobs. And I have a lot of friends who work in television, scripted, or narrative, or in reality. They move up quicker because there's just more turnaround. Seasons happen now constantly, so sometimes you get out of sync, like your show that you did first season on comes on in September, but you just took a job 3 months ago on a different show and you can't go back, so seat opens, people get moved up, it happens. So that's the good thing. What people don't really address often is that you kind of reboot your career multiple times in your life. Like when you start out as a PA and you don't know nothing, you want to be an assistant. That's the same kind of reboot when you're an assistant, you try and want to edit now. Like only a few people are really as lucky if you work for Clint Eastwood when you get bumped up from assistant in a Clint Eastwood movie to edit for the next 20 years on an Eastwood movie. That's great, but that doesn't really happen that often. It usually comes with like a cut. You start like lower and you work your way up. And that's part of that too. But your question was more about mentoring in a way. I was lucky in television. I had Laura Jane Coleman, who was mentoring me, and then Matt Chessy in features, and both were willing to teach, and that needs to be there. If you really want it, you will get it. If you're just so about it, if you don't stay the 13th, 14th hour to cut that scene after you've done all your assistant duties, you probably don't want it enough. That's the sad truth.
If you're an assistant editor saying, well, I've done this for 6 years, so I'm ready to be an editor now, nobody's going to hand it to you. Nobody. But if you make it very clear that it's what you want, you go out of your way, and you're really good at your actual job, that's when the transition happens. But most people either see one component of that and not the other, but they don't see both.
Time in the chair does not equal opportunity.
It means nothing.
Yeah, and there is a sense of entitlement. I hate to use the word millennials, but there's a sense of entitlement sometimes that, you know, people think, well, I've done this and therefore. No, I mean, it's exactly what everyone's saying here. You have to really want it, you have to go for it and prove that you deserve it.
And I think the other point that you made, which is really true, is you never stop paying dues.
Yes.
It seems like this is much harder in feature films because, as everybody's noticed, that middle space has been hollowed out. It's either blockbusters or indies. What's the path from an indie to the next level? Is there a path?
Surviving long enough
Surviving
until that next
long
level kicks in.
So is that where time on the chair pays off?
If it's time in the chair cutting, any experience cutting is a worthwhile experience. And the key for me moving up was sort of pursuing multiple paths. Like I was working as an assistant, but I was cutting short films for free on the side, which goes into that work for free thing. I never charged for any short film I've ever done. The investment was for a future career, and it happened. Dave Green, who I've been cutting shorts for since 2008, got a movie, and I happened to be on it. But it happened because I was cutting for my editors on the job as well, and then cutting on the side, and basically these things need to align. You have to basically see your future opportunities, and then when the opportunity arises, you need to be ready for them.
It's basically a law of averages. The more opportunities that you create for yourselves, the more likely you are to get that slot. Because at the end of the day, I know some feature editors that are completely awesome and completely awful. I just can't believe that they were allowed to ever cut a real feature for any amount of money. They just happened to be in the right place at the right time, and they got chosen where perhaps with a little extra effort on the producer's part, he said as a producer, they would have found a better person to do that role. And that's where the opportunities and the knowledge and the networking that we're doing and all that kind of stuff comes in very handy.
This builds the opportunities, but you do have to be able to deliver when you get there. That's the key.
Yeah.
Luck for the opportunity, and then after that, it's all on you.
True.
So it is a bit of a luck that if you develop a relationship with an independent director and all of a sudden they get noticed, then hopefully they'll take you with them.
Yeah, if they can.
But of all those shorts that you cut, only a few of those people will
So
get
far-
that moat.
so far one.
Will get one. And
Yeah.
how many did you cut?
Probably 8.
Probably 8 or 9. And that's probably about right.
Even if it's 1 out of 10, that's pretty good.
It's not bad, yeah.
Okay, we're going to move to a topic that I know is close to Zach's heart. Health and safety is something that's gotten talked about recently with the death of Sarah Jones. There's problems in the edit suite as well. I mean, you're sitting in a dark room, sitting in a chair, which is now sitting as the new smoking. Right?
Hey, that's a great line.
Yeah, it's not my line.
Somebody should put that on a website.
This is kind of a passion of yours.
Yes, kind of a passion, I think, is probably an understatement. I hear a lot lately, kind of when people joke about fitness in post and say, oh, that's an oxymoron, ha ha ha, and somebody will say, well, nobody has ever died in the edit chair. And my argument is that's actually the exact opposite. Everybody in our industry is dying. It's just not happening by train and happening immediately. But over the course of a long period of time, by being sedentary, by eating poorly, by not being active, by being surrounded by electromagnetic frequencies all day long, we're taking years off of our lives, literally 3, 5, 10 years off of our life, the same way that smoking a pack of cigarettes a day would. This is all verifiable scientific research. It's not just me throwing ideas out there. Like, they've done scientific research showing that being sedentary for 6 to 8 hours a day is actually shortening the telomeres, which are the markers in our system that say that we are aging or not aging. So smoking a pack of cigarette a day and being active or sitting in front of a computer, same thing to your health. Basically, the short version of my story, because I want the whole panel to be a part of this, not just me, but I was 25 years old, and I was this height, but I was 145 pounds, suicidally depressed, and I could not function because of the stress of working in this industry, cutting a feature film for 90 hours a week, literally 7 days a week. I didn't have a day off for months straight. I was doing it for $600 flat per week because I was trying to get credit, like he was saying. So this was my full-time job, trying to live off of this, and it literally just about killed me. And I said, I love what I do for a living, but I'm not going to survive. Literally, I didn't think I was going to survive another 12 months, much less another, 60 years. And I said, I have to find a way to fix that. And over the course of the last decade, it's been experiment after experiment after experiment. And then like 2 years ago, I finally cracked the code for myself and said, this actually can be done. People don't believe that you can be fit and healthy and be in our industry. And I said to myself, it can be done because I'm doing it. But nobody knows how yet, so I've been trying to implement the steps and find a way to teach it to people and prove to them that it's not an oxymoron anymore. And it's not an easy sales pitch, but it's finally starting to get into the zeitgeist. And a year ago when I did this, people are like, the heck is he talking about? And I was like, are they going to throw tomatoes at me? Right, exactly. But now people are enthusiastic about it, and they're emailing about it, and they're talking about it, and they're saying, hey, I did plank during a render break today. And like the culture is starting to change. It's not about doing push-ups or planks or whatever. It's about the fact that we need to start empowering ourselves in this industry to actually take care of ourselves, because we just think, well, it's post, and I'm just, you know, overweight and sluggish and slow, and that's just part of our industry. And I'm just like, enough is enough. Like, we have to actually take care of ourselves and empower ourselves to say, no, it's not an option whether or not you're going to give me a standing desk. I want a standing desk at this job. Like, that's just the way that it's going to work. And people don't feel empowered to do that. And that's pretty much what I'm trying to change, because the well-being in our industry just sucks.
So did you bring that up at Empire?
Oh, absolutely. I brought it up. It's a huge thing in Empire.
And how did it go?
Everybody has standing desks.
What are some of the things you tried that didn't work for you?
Ton of different ways that I tried eating, finding time to go to the gym in our industry just does not work. Like, that is a recipe for disaster. For me, it's not even so much about exercise anymore. It's about adapting my behavior throughout the day to be constantly active. So on Empire for 6 months, like, I didn't have time to exercise for an hour a day. I mean, I have 2 young kids, so any spare time I have, I'm gonna spend with them and not sweating by myself in a room. But I found ways to be active all day, every day. Like,
What kinds of things would you do?
like producers will come into the room and they'll see me swinging kettlebells, and I'll be using resistance bands, and I have all kinds of different tools that I have in my office. I actually just did a blog for Creative Cow, like listing how I built the gym into my edit suite. I'll get 15, 20,000 steps a day just by being active and doing stretch breaks every 45 minutes. And that I get faster and stronger and leaner on Empire? God, no. But I didn't regress. I didn't go backwards.
And what do producers think when they come in?
They love it. Lee Daniels will come into the room. He's like, where's that trigger point therapy? I want to do some foam rolling while I watch the cover. He loves it. He's like, make me Shakeology. He's like, okay. So people love it. They're so completely into it. And they'll see the little contraptions I have, like for my hands or my wrist, you know, whatever it is, and then they'll buy it, and it becomes contagious because they see that I have all this energy. I'll work an 80-hour week. I'll come in Monday morning. I'm like, oh, where are dailies? Where are dailies? And like, how do you have so much energy? It's like, because I've found ways to adapt my environment and be active and eat properly.
What do you do with regards to eating?
Well, what I've done is I've adapted to being able to cook my own meals at the office. I'm not going to complain about this. They offer our meals to us, so they cater to us, which is becoming more common, but it's all garbage.
Yeah.
And if I eat out every single day, twice a day, that's going to destroy me. So I just said to them, and I advocate for everybody to do this, and all your post supervisors are going to hate me, but I went in and I said, whatever your budget is for us every day for lunch, I want to be reimbursed that for my own groceries. I will prepare it myself. I will make it myself. I will not lose any work time. But if everybody gets $75 a week to eat out and get Chinese and Thai food and burgers, I want that amount so I can go out and buy my own food. And I had a George Foreman grill and I had a steamer. And I would just make my own meals at work. And people will be like, I want that for lunch. I'm like, go make it. And they'll go use the grill. So there are ways to do it, and it's not perfect, and it's a work in progress. I've now proven, not just me, but through other people I'm working with, that it can totally be done in our industry. And it's literally changing the way that they work. And kind of the sales pitch is that everybody out here is all about optimizing their operating system and their hard drives and everything else.
Workflow.
Workflow, right?
Right.
The best operating system on the planet is this. And nobody focuses on this operating system. And if you focus on this as your operating system, that's when you become so much better at what you do. People are like, well, how did you rise up so fast? It's like, because I take care of myself. That's how I'm able to survive and thrive in the industry, not because I'm that much better of an editor. It's because I treat myself like a Ferrari and not a Ford Pinto, which is what most editors do, is they're like, well, I just got to get to point A to point B, that's it, right? And then hiatus comes.
Yeah.
But nothing ever gets fixed during hiatus.
Yeah.
So I just kind of had to reverse that thinking and say, every day has got to be about optimizing performance, not sluggishly getting to the finish line and fixing it all during hiatus, because it never comes.
Does anybody resonate with what they just heard?
What's interesting too is like that you're adept. No one really addresses the 80-hour work week issue.
Yeah.
Right.
You noticed that.
Yeah, I noticed that. That is a problem too, and not just Sarah Jones, but there's also the DP that lost his life.
Yes. Brent's law.
Yes, camera operator.
Because you're working for 12 hours on set, 14 hours, 15 hours, and we work 80-hour weeks, 90-hour weeks, and that can't be healthy, and you're trying to adapt your life to be as healthy as possible within that parameter. But maybe it's time to also rethink the situation.
Is that ever going to happen?
I went through, when I was doing a series a few years ago with another producer, Tim Isofano, whom some of you may know, and I was like, why are we shooting 12-hour days? I mean, do we really have to shoot a television series? And we decided, and we went through, we did an entire analysis of what would happen if we went back to an 8-hour day. And we went to the vendors and said, we're gonna have to increase the number of days because we still have the same number of setups to do, et cetera. So we did all that math. We figured out, yes, we could do it over a year. There were 2 reasons that we figured out that we would probably never be able to succeed at. The first was the series regulars who use their time away, such as on your show Empire. The next thing that will happen is that all of the people that are made stars by your show will now want to do that movie in the 3 or 4 months that they have between season 1 and season 2, or season 2 and season 3.
And they also want less days during the
want
actual
less
shoot,
days.
too.
So the actors, but you can't blame them because they have very foreshortened careers in many cases, and it's difficult. So you can bitch about it, but it's a real world issue. But the other one was more interesting. The crew doesn't want it. The reason is the crew, and we polled the crew. We went down and we talked to the crew. Would you prefer to have an 8-hour week, 8-hour day, 40-hour week over a longer period of time? And the general consensus was no. And the reason is they have become so dependent upon their overtime.
Yeah, golden time.
That they felt that working a full year with a couple of weeks off for a real holiday, even if we offered a paid holiday, wasn't as good as the money they felt they could make if they worked the massive overtime. And as much as we like to complain about the bad director who generates that overtime, the grips love it.
So Mark, I'm curious, do you do anything at Bunim Murray to promote the health of the...
Well, speaking of standing desks, I would say out of 100 or so edit suites, probably about 30% now, standing desks are popping up all over the place.
Yeah.
It started out with taking something like 2 Apple boxes and putting it on there, and now there are options where you can buy something that sits on a normal desk and rises up. And I'm seeing that a lot of editors are starting to use that. A lot of people have exercise equipment in the bays. But regarding the long hours,
you don't do that.
we do not do that. I just think it's bull.
I think it's a bad idea too.
And I'm sorry, but I challenge you guys to be creative after 12 hours. It just can't happen.
But hang on.
It's diminishing
Notice
returns.
what you just said. After 12 hours, we have the worst employment conditions of any union in the United States. The Directors Guild of America does not go into overtime until hour 16 by union contract.
Okay.
And we all sit there and we go, oh, 12-hour days. I don't think you can be real creative after 8.
Well, I know that they've done a lot of research where they show that people who are workaholics are much less efficient, a lot less done. I think also when you're in tough conditions, that's part of the camaraderie that it builds. We're working so hard, we're working so long.
I've tried to remap that with AlphaDogs.
Good.
I mean,
I like that.
we have, there's crunch times, obviously, but that's not the norm.
Right.
Well, I think also to go off of your point, which I think is a very good one that you said to me, which is, well, you've adapted, but how do we adapt the industry? Part of my strategy is that you can't have the energy to go in and fight for what you want if you feel like crap. If you're barely surviving and you're driving to work half asleep, which I've done before, not recently, but when I was in my bad stage, I would fall asleep on the way to work, and I would get there and I would have to take a nap for 45 minutes to an hour a day because I was spent, because my job was killing me. Do you think I had the energy to go into a post supervisor and say, I'm not going to stand up for this anymore? I didn't. Now I do. Now I intimidate them because they know that I'm so passionate about this.
And they know you have the energy.
Right, and they know that I have the energy, so they're like, well, I don't want to deal with this. Whatever he wants, let's give it to him, right? When I asked for that reimbursement on the food, at first I got this look, and they're like, yeah, no problem, sure.
So what is the editor?
But that gives me the empowerment and the energy to now do something about the hours. So I'm very adamant about hours, where I've worked with editors where it's like, yeah, I was here until 4:30 last night, and I'm like, you didn't even tell anybody or get paid for it. When I hit 12 hours, I'm working for a studio. You're going to pay for it.
We're starting to get some questions. I've got a Twitter question here. Somebody wants to know, with regard to wiring infrastructure, 10 gig Ethernet or fiber, which is the way to go?
10 gig Ethernet.
10 gig Ethernet. Terry, you're not so sure about that?
Only because, okay, so if you're putting in 10 gig Ethernet, you're going to put in Cat 6E right now, and in 3 years they'll go, oh, that can't handle the bandwidth, and so you have to rewire your whole facility. Whereas fiber, being optical, is always going to be scalable up. When I started, I had fiber, it was at 1 gig.
Right.
Now I can put 10 gig cards on. I can put 16 gig on there if I want, And the cost of the wire is not the big thing. It's the cost of wiring. The actual labor is the, So if you can put something in that is always future expandable,
Does
seems like
anybody
a
else
better
have some
investment.
I say wireless.
wireless? I have another question, another tweet here. Somebody, this is a great question. What camera is best for 4K?
4K camera.
All of them.
4K.
Oh, but then, you know, hashtag old school or hashtag new school.
Okay, you know what the
I know what that
DPs
means.
love?
What?
The Airy, Alexa.
Yes.
You know what? It's not
It's
4K.
2K, I know. I know, right.
Or a mirror.
It's funny because editors like to say it's not the NLE we use,
Right.
we're storytellers, you know, it's how to use it, and I think that goes for cameras. I watch a movie like Prometheus or whatever, one of the most gorgeous movies shot on red ever, but I can point at least a couple of movies out that were shot on red that don't look
Yeah.
half as good.
Yeah.
and the same goes for the Alexa. I've seen shows that look fantastic, but I've also seen TV shows shot on the Alexa where you wonder, did not look that good.
As long as it doesn't have a rolling shutter.
Exactly.
So, I mean, there's going to be, that is definitely one thing we are going to see at NAB. You're going to see so many 4K cameras, your head's going to spin.
The best 4K camera is the one with a good DP standing
Exactly.
behind
It's
it.
the
Exactly.
artist,
Bravo,
right?
I like that one.
I would suggest that
Infrastructure.
4K now, in the camera universe, since we've had that now for a couple of years, is
Yeah.
probably old. We'll probably see more 8K cameras this year, would be my guess.
Yeah, those will be the interesting.
No, but I've been getting emails about all kinds of, you know, there's so many 4K cameras on the low end now. It's unbelievable how,
But the first 4Ks were how many years ago, Deb?
Red, 2 years, 3
2
years?
years maybe.
Okay, so from 2 years to 3 years now is the cycle to get from the new technology to cheap.
Right, right.
It does affect post, though. I worked on Dragon Tattoo, and the Fincher way of doing things has kind of become a little bit more mainstream, which is way more work for everybody, because you're not shooting one frame size, you're shooting an extraction of that frame size, and that means every single frame becomes at one point sort of a visual effect. So it's wonderful if you have 6K available and you have a problem and you need to zoom in, and it's great. And you can't do that with an Alexa or whatever on 2K. But so there are some good things about that in acquisition, and it does affect post in that regard.
We have a question here.
I just wanted to contribute a little bit to the conversation about changing the working hours of the industry. Having been an assistant editor and now an editor, but I've filed a time card for 41 straight hours, and I know people who've done 10, 20 more than that in one shift. And the thing that kind of occurs to me, in which I completely agree with you, Zack, on, is that when you have the energy to fight it, you can, and when you're in the position of seniority to fight it, you can. A lot of the people that are working the craziest hours are the assistants who can't. One, because they're replaceable, and they're also exhausted. I'm kind of curious, to hear you guys chime in on, like, how do you...
Why do you say you can't?
As an assistant editor?
Yeah.
You're worried about losing your job?
Well, will you worry about losing your life?
I'm curious, after a 40-hour shift, were you hallucinating?
Yeah.
60 is usually the crossing point.
I agree with Evan. Like I just got my first apprentice editing movie on a studio, and that was 90-hour weeks, and like 28 days straight, no time off. I can't leave that job. This is like, it's that break. I know you have a choice, but the choice is
There
well,
is an
like,
answer to it. Down in New Zealand, for those of you old enough to remember Xena and Hercules that was shot down in New Zealand, okay? If you ever go and watch them again, and you might need to go back, there are no night scenes. There are no exterior night scenes in all of those shows. And the reason is because the crew would not allow it. And the rule was they had a 10-hour day, period. The only way that you could get to overtime was if the entire crew
Agreed.
had to agree. And the only way they would agree is if it was demonstrable that it was not the fault of anyone in the production. In other words, if the grip truck broke down on the way to location because the grip truck broke down, we're all going to pitch in and get the job done no matter what it takes. However, if the producers have not maintained the truck properly, according to the transportation department, the answer is we go home in 10 hours. And it's amazing how it came in on time and on budget. Just saying. Point is, everybody has to get together, and that's why I'm saying it. You have to get together, and you have to say, it's now an issue.
Well, we have another tweet here, which somebody is saying the writers for I Love Lucy worked 9 to 5.
Yep.
What happened to the sitcom world that now works crazy hours? But I think we're saying this pretty much everything, and I agree that part of it is people love the overtime.
Well, Lucy wasn't as funny.
But it doesn't have to be, and Mark is, giving it a perfect example. Bunim doesn't do this
should
crazy
applaud
hours.
that.
Yeah.
No, and Mark
Right.
should be applauded for that.
Yes.
Well, it's not, I mean, listen,
Absolutely.
I don't, it's not, my name's not on the door, but from John Murray on down, I mean, we have certain values that we, a work-life balance. We really believe that. And it's like I have a life outside of what I do here, and I like to spend time with my family. And I'm just not that smart to be creative after 10 hours.
But, I think part of it in Hollywood, there's a lot of people who are ruled by fear.
Yeah.
And it's whoever's at the top, if they're ruled by fear,
Yeah.
they're calling the shots. Everybody else has to dance.
We've been in business for over 20-some years, so it's not like we didn't just come up with this idea last week. It's been working, and yeah, sure, there's crunch times when things get tough, but By and large, that's not the status quo. Day in and day out, that is not the
So
status
do
quo.
you have very little turnover because people just like that
There are a lot of
policy?
people that have been there for a long time, but most people are project-oriented. They work show to show. But we've been fortunate that a lot of shows keep repeating and coming back. Real World is in season 30.
Oh my God.
Challenge is in season 27. So we were really good at putting numbers after a title. And fortunately, we're able to schedule things so that it comes one after another. And I'm sympathetic to your plight, but there are alternative universes out there.
When you hit a shift of 40 hours or 50 hours or 60 hours, I'm talking from experience, a big budget editorial where they can pay a crew of 12 people to work those hours and it doesn't, nobody's going to bat.
It's not about the money.
It's not about the money. They've got enough money to pay
You
for
gotta
the
stay
overtime,
here until
which
you
either
get it
means
done.
the overtime isn't expensive enough or the planning isn't good, and if you miss that deadline, you've just missed your, the first premiere of your movie.
Yeah,
So the pressure is obviously very great.
I like the idea that the overtime isn't enough.
It's interesting, especially in features,
like
the
that.
editors always interact with the sound guys when we reach the mix stage, and they usually leave at 7. And the reason is, and that's part of technology becoming cheaper, the sound stage is really expensive.
Yeah.
So if you stay in overtime on the sound stage, you have to pay the entire crew, but you also have to pay the facility. And as editors, you can cut on a laptop now, and it doesn't really matter. Just put them in a trailer and let it keep going. But I think it's a top-down mentality. If it's scheduled well, then it works.
Part of that is also money. I mean, it comes down to business. In the case of television, especially reality television, learn to be extremely efficient to pull off what they can on a lean budget. In the theatrical world, where they think an $18 million film is a low budget, there's a lot of money to piss away, and they do. It's really weird.
But I go back to your I Love Lucy point. They
Yeah.
were in at 9, they were out at 5. They
Right.
knew how to do it. They got it done.
Well, Clint Eastwood's like that.
Clint Eastwood,
But he's
that's
an
right.
Those are the writers.
What about the editors?
Those are the writers.
Yeah,
What about the editors on Lucy? We don't know about that, right?
No, actually we do. I actually was the assistant editor to the editor of I Love Lucy, and he made the same point.
It was 9
They
to
were
5.
in by 9 to 5.
Well, I like that. I like it.
The other thing, and this is going to be on a case-by-case basis, but if you're intimidated to go to a post supervisor or a producer, go to your editor, because I know that if my assistant comes in and was like, oh my God, they expect me to do this all weekend, blah, 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 I'm like, oh no, that's not going to happen. Like,
Right.
what do you mean? I'm like, because I'm going to tell the producer that they're not doing that, because I need you, and if you don't function well for me, then you're not going to be good for any task whatsoever. So either they can choose to hire other help or get somebody else to do it, or they're just not going to do it. So I think that your editor can be an advocate where you're saying, well, as an assistant, I don't have an advocate. And again, it's a case-by-case basis because you might hate the editor you work with.
Yeah, I mean, not all editors are going to be your advocate. though,
Right,
are
but
they?
I think that it's at least a subject
they
worth
should be.
They should be.
broaching because you may not feel you have the power, but the editor, like on my show, they've tried to do that before. They try to pull fast, and I'm like, yeah, no, that's not going to happen. Like you need to find a way around
So
it.
I have a question for you. So you've said earlier you're a hustler, and that's pretty clear from listening to you. And clearly, I speak this as a producer, you would obviously have no fear about walking into my office and telling me the assistant isn't going to work on the weekend and I better get somebody else. My question is, has it cost you a job?
Me? No.
That's my point.
Because he's good.
Because
Yeah.
he's really good.
Right, right.
And the really good ones, when they come in, unless the producer is a complete dolt, which happens.
They're out there, yeah.
They're out there.
They're out
There's
there.
only a couple, but they're out there. A couple thousand. And I think that's a point that needs to be stressed.
Right.
Is that your ability to stand up and say, excuse me, this is how we're going to do this, because we do know how to do this. We are professionals, and we do it for our living. And I'm sorry, but you may be the producer, but you really don't know what you're doing.
But also you can say, I'm
It's
looking out
fine.
for your interests as well.
Yeah,
right?
and
exactly
You're
what-
looking
and
out for
that's
the
what it
Really
is.
are looking out for their best
It's
interests.
a matter of them having to do a weekend. It's like, well, that's our business. You got to suck it up for a weekend, and it's crunch time. When it's
Poor
crossing
planning.
that line of taking advantage of somebody's life and their health,
40
just because
hours?
you need to meet a certain demand and a deadline, which most likely was caused by poor planning, somebody not giving notes on time, somebody's calendar is screwed up. It's like you said, if they're not maintaining the truck
I am so
well
upset.
enough,
I can't do notes
yeah,
today.
and I have those days where I've sat around for 6 days straight on a project waiting for notes, and then 2 weeks later I'm in dailies and I'm trying to deliver my previous show. That's not my fault. That's
No.
somebody else's fault. And if they want me to do 2 minutes of overtime, they pay for it.
Right.
If I decide that I want to make this scene that much better, and I just haven't gotten it there, I'll put in 4 hours of overtime, and nobody will ever know that it happened. But if it's not my choice because I want to be better at what I do, and it's because somebody misscheduled something, if I'm there for 12 hours and 2 minutes, they are paying me an hour of overtime because that's not my fault.
Well, I wonder
you have
how
to
many
build up the
people are
courage
being
to
like,
do
are
that.
like you, Zach, and are out there really kind of advocating for their assistants and advocating for themselves. I think most people are fearful.
I'm done listening to this because I did have a scenario.
Okay, let's hear it.
This is the
Let's
thing.
hear it.
This is a problem in our industry. It really
It
is.
is.
It
People
is.
are overworked and underpaid or not even paid. And I'll give you an example. Movie of the week. They cut the director's cut from 5 days down to 3. I said, okay, are you going to pay me the overtime to do the director's cut now in 3 days as opposed to 5? Right. No, we are not. How am I supposed to get this done? You're going to get it done. Luckily, the director was a friend of mine who I had a 20-year relationship because I cut her short.
All full circle.
But the problem
Were you an
is
intern?
that I did it for her only. I don't know what I would have done if it wasn't my friend. That was a sacrifice we made together, and yet never got a thank you from the production. So I don't know what to do with this, and even you're working 60 hours on a TV show, or maybe even
That's a
more,
good week.
because of talent not being able to lock down their schedules, and that affects our health. So I don't.
Unfortunately, there's a whole boatload of people who want to edit and be in this industry.
Right.
And that's the problem. It's highly competitive. And so it's easy for them to go, well, we'll get somebody else. And we're always under that fear in this
Yes,
industry.
well, this is-
It's there. It's nagging you all the time.
It's a sidebar to this. In the last couple of years, my agents have been putting me up on films at lower than rate. If I say something, it's like, well, that's what the producer's going to pay. And what does happen is sooner or later, the union sort of might or might not catch up to it. But what occurs, they're under that pressure.
You're saying hiring less than scale?
Yeah.
On supposedly a union show?
Yes. I got an offer last week to do a show in Spokane, and I said, no, I just don't want this. You're not going to pay me an assistant's wage for that many weeks. But he said, well, that's what the offer was. I don't know that there's an answer to that. It seems to be a system that compresses wherever anybody can pull it off.
We talked about paying your dues to get those credits. Somebody will take that job because they feel that it'll benefit their career.
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely.
Why are they going after talent?
They want their cake and eat it too. They want to have the good talent, but they don't want to pay for it.
The triangle
Yeah,
on the
the
whiteboard
triangle.
in my office.
Cheaper, better, faster.
Cheaper, better, faster, pick 2, right? We have another question that's come in via Twitter. Is education now on internet versus in person?
You can learn how to edit. You can't learn to be an editor, but you can learn how to press the buttons. The process of the technical side of it is completely and totally online, because there are people like Maxim Jago and Richard Harrington that they're just creating all this great stuff. But what's really getting lost, and this is a huge pet peeve of mine, is they're not learning why they're making the choices they're making. If you're an editor, you're making decisions all day long, and you can be the best person on the planet at Final Cut 10, Adobe Premiere, and Avid, but if you don't know why you press the buttons, you're not going to be any good at what you do. And that you cannot learn by going on a tutorial online. You have to learn that by interacting with people.
Play devil's advocate a bit, because it's different people learn different ways. If somebody has a natural talent, a lot of times musicians make better editors, or just naturally kind of flow into it, because they have the natural beat, the rhythm, which is so important.
It's all about
in
the
editing.
music.
It is. It really is. If you're that person and you're getting from tutorials on the internet how to operate the system, et cetera, yes, maybe so. If you don't have that and you're trying to learn the concepts of editing and why would you make a decision, that's hard to teach in a video. On the other hand, just watching movies, I mean, there's some really great directors who just taught themselves by watching movies and seeing how
Well, I
other
was just
people
going to
do
say,
it.
my son
So-
decided when he was about 12, my son indicated he really wanted to get into the movie business, and I was unfortunately unable to dissuade him.
Right.
I said, okay, so here's what you should do. Go to the top 200 list, the top 250 list, whatever it is. I do not care where you start. Just watch all of those movies.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I will pay for all of the DVDs. I will pay for the rental, but watch all of them. He actually did watch them, and I can honestly say this is more than just a dad being proud of his kid. He knows how to cut.
You know,
and I don't think that's something that you can impart except by doing what we've probably all done.
Yes.
which is we love this stuff, so we watch all those movies.
You know,
and
it's
we watch
shocking
all
to
those
me how
movies.
many young people that want a career in film who don't know any of the classic films.
Exactly,
haven't seen
that's
any
where
of
I'm
them.
going.
It's storytelling and empathy, I feel. As an editor, it doesn't matter what it is, if it's a documentary or a thriller about a serial killer. My mentor, Laurie Jane Coleman, she cut a movie about a serial killer once, and she still told me that I had to feel empathy for him. You know, you
have
got
to
to
be
get
competent
depth
for a while.
for that
Right,
character,
right.
exactly. And you don't learn that from a tutorial how to make an insert edit in Final Cut on YouTube. What you do learn is reading books, listening to music. I actually think music is completely, is another thing. Like, as an editor, we need to temp score all the time. I don't sit at home and constantly listen to score, but I do get them, and I do try to be current. And the same goes for books, and go to a museum, try to like expand your horizon, because it's all part of life.
There's another part of the editorial duties, and that is that, you know, editors are a bit therapists, they're a bit diplomats. There's the human interaction. A lot of the things, the hours and the negotiations that we're talking about here, you know, that's part of the job too. And that's only going to come from interaction with people. You're not going to see that on the internet. You know, you were touching on the technical and on the sort of the larger scale of the prior art, that kind of stuff. What I'm talking about is how you conduct yourself, how you interact with people. And that is the assistant editor relationship, the apprentice, you know, those kind of things can only come from being in the presence of others who are doing the job.
That's right.
And I would argue that that skill is oftentimes missing in the young people coming up. They're like, oh, I want to do this, but they don't understand what it means to do that, to be present.
And to be in relationship.
Yeah.
Somebody wants us to compare the concept of think before you cut in film to modern digital editing of edit before you think.
Oh, John Moore, shut up. I know him. I know that guy.
You know, it was the advantage to film costing so much is you had to figure out what you were
You
going to
had to
shoot
actually
before you
think
shot it.
before
Yeah.
you made the
Right,
edit.
not just roll cameras all day and let's see what we put together.
I think what's good about it is a decision-making process that is kind of lacking often nowadays, and in
Too
all
easy.
departments, because you can
Definitely,
make so many changes and so many options.
Don't think
that-
about it, just make another cut.
Well, that was the thing with the NLEs when they first came in. People said, oh, it'll save so much time, when in fact it just gave people more time to iterate endlessly, right?
Make more changes.
There's another question. How does an Emmy award-winning editor in unscripted television break into scripted television or feature films?
It is a misnomer to think that experience in reality is transferable to scripted. A lot of people come through, and I tell them right up front, if they're assists, you are better off grabbing coffee, back to the internship thing, in an environment where people are doing that, then you can spend 3, 4, 5 years in reality, and they don't care. It's, the experience is not relevant.
The disciplines don't cross that much. It works the other way too, by the way. The people that know how to cut scripted
Yeah.
probably will not be able to do a reality show to save their
We
life,
have
or a
proven
documentary.
that.
Yeah,
We
you've
have
probably proven that.
We have proven that with Academy Award-winning documentary editors
Really?
who have failed.
Oh my God.
Reality is
So
more like documentary. I think
Yeah,
there you can get
it is.
crisscross because it's, I got a pile of stuff.
Television.
I almost went there. And I've got to make something out of this, as opposed to scripted where you're going, you know, they worked with this and they've already cut it and I know where we're going with it. How can I
I have
polish it,
6
make it
setups.
better?
Right,
Which one
Or
do I
fix
want?
problems or whatever.
Right.
But, you know, that's different than, here's a pile, how do I build this into something? It's a totally
It's
different
interesting
mindset.
about storytelling too, because on a film that I did, I hired the director who had not done a feature, but had done a lot of commercials. And I thought I was so smart. It was a low budget thing. I wanted to give somebody a break, blah, blah, blah. And in the nature, Ridley Scott and, you know, all of these
So
other
many
directors
others,
that
yeah.
had started in commercials.
And music
Didn't know how to tell a story.
That was more than 30 seconds?
Didn't know how to, well, no, didn't know how to do continuity, didn't know how to block, and didn't know how to really tell a long-term story. What he knew how to do was make really pretty pictures.
I think on the flip side, though, before moving forwards, I think it's doing a disservice to the people that can transition, because to say that because you do reality, you can't do scripted and vice versa.
That's a good point.
To make that a blanket statement, I think is dangerous, because a lot of people did that to me. I've cut trailers, I've cut commercials, I've cut documentaries, I've cut behind-the-scenes featurettes. I've cut just about everything, and people look at my resume and they say, how the hell did you get on Empire? It's because I know how to tell a story, and I think that to just say, well, you're in reality, you can't cross over,
I think that there is an actual
I would
answer to
agree.
his
So
question.
what would your advice
And
be?
my answer to his question is he needs to be ready to take a step backwards before he takes a
Yes.
step forwards. It is not transferable one-to-one. You can't just say, well, I won an Emmy as a reality editor, so I'm just obligated and you owe me a job as an editor in scripted. No, you have to prove yourself. Welcome to the industry, that's how it works. But you have to be given that opportunity and be willing to take that one step backwards.
But Zach, would you not agree that most people that would be hiring you would look at that resume of somebody who's done years in reality and go, you know, you're not a good risk to put on a show as an actor?
Absolutely. If we're talking about a show like Empire, there's no way that we would hire somebody that only has a
Well,
reality
they need
resume.
to do people shorts.
But if
then,
they do
right?
the step backwards and they had a
do
reality
stuff for-
resume,
No, it's
let's say they have a
yeah,
reality
yeah.
resume for 10 years,
Yeah.
but then they're an assistant editor for 2 years in scripted, then they have some decent scripted credits. I'm not going to discredit them because they have reality. It's if they only have reality, they need to be willing to kind of retrain their brain and take jobs that might be a step back in pay or in quality. So
You
you
know,
don't start
it's
from
the same
scratch.
question, like as an assistant editor, how to become an editor. It's the same question in
Yes,
a way. Like,
paying the dues. All right, we have
have a
another
question.
in-person
Yes.
question.
Hi, yeah, I'm a documentary film editor, and I have a job coming up. It's 4K and it's remote. I never worked with 4K footage before. Just any input you might have for my workflow.
You're not going to be cutting it for
Yeah,
me.
you won't, probably won't.
See?
Yeah.
See?
Well, that's what we were talking about.
What-
we were
what
going
edit-
to use
what
a
editing
proxy
system? Do you
proxy
know?
files.
Yeah, you'll be
Do you
using
know what
proxy.
editing system you'll be on?
Yeah, we'll be on Premiere Pro. I mean, I heard you guys earlier saying in terms of creative cloud that it's easy to kind of work with your client because my director's going to be in Florida and I'm here. So.
Oh, okay.
But what you had said to me earlier was that the producers were expressing a certain desire to want to cut in 4K
Yes.
as their method of
Yeah, they wanted to cut, but I haven't spoken to them at that point, so I don't know if they just don't know that you can't do it.
Probably.
or-
If they said to you,
Try
our preference is that you edit upside down in gravity boots, you say, I don't edit that way.
Yeah,
You know, it's the
yeah.
same thing with 4K. It's like, if you want it to be efficient, you want to really like seal the deal, tell them, you want me to make an output and you want me to compress it and post it online for you, expect that to take a day.
No, here's how you really,
Here's what I was just going to say.
Right?
So that's what you should do.
here's how you really
Show
seal
them
the
a
deal.
sequence cut that way.
Yeah,
and
you
then
go,
they'll
I'll cut
they'll
in
come around
4K if
quickly.
you triple my salary. Because
There you go.
that's what it's going to take, and it's going to cost you triple in storage, in bandwidth, in transfer fees, all that stuff. And if you want to pay that, fine.
Okay.
But otherwise, it's proxy all the way.
There's a question.
Contribution, but I come from a reality world. Do you guys think that perhaps the elongated work hours come from producers and directors going out and shooting without a direct focus or a story?
Yes. God, I love you.
I work in because I work in
You're
marketing.
so polite.
And definitely no respect. But I come from I come from an indie background as well as marketing and sort of reality. And like I noticed that we get a lot of footage that's kind of. Like,
Well, okay, I'll address this.
Is it that pile of?
We're molding it into that.
Yeah,
But
I call it the vacuum cleaner approach to coverage, where you just suck up everything inside, and you know there is no like directing focus where you want attention to be.
Well, because it's digital cameras.
Well,
They
there's that,
roll
but
in.
it's a lack of vision. It's a lack of confidence. It's a lack. So anyway, the answer is yes, that happens all the time, and I think specifically in reality, you know, we're caught between two worlds. Part of us wants it to be, you know, a fly in the wall cinema verite coverage, and then the network goes, well, nothing happened, and then you're forced to enhance reality or.
Make it up.
Did you just say that?
And that's the dichotomy that you're caught with. So you don't want to be directing, but so you want it to look real, you want it to feel real, you actually want to get real events. But real events, as we all know, are boring. So then you're caught between these two, and some of the people that are doing this don't have the film school background, don't understand, don't know how to block us. Well, you're not blocking because you're not telling people what to do.
Don't even know what blocking is.
Well,
They think
but-
it's something
but-
they did as children.
But maybe blocking is irrelevant in this situation because you're not telling people what to do. But it's certainly different, and we don't live in a vacuum. The industry moves on in different areas. So it is what it is, but I'm sympathetic to your observation.
I give you the award for using the word focus.
It does happen in scripted as well.
Well, that must really piss you off.
No, not really. If you go back to Hitchcock or whatever, there's these stories that he only shot a specific close-up because he wouldn't want the studio to recut it, so there's very little coverage. And Clint Eastwood is known for his director's cut lasts a week.
This is what I'm going to give you to work with, and that's it.
Yeah, exactly. And 3 takes and done, you know. But there's also the David Fincher. He creates a lot of footage not because he's unfocused, because he's very focused. It's the exact opposite. I think because it's becoming cheaper to shoot, obviously that has to do for an assistant workflow. And it's for editors, it's bad too. The biggest issue with the whole thing is that they just keep the cameras running and do resets within it, and then it becomes just a giant mess. But it's work, and it's one of the greatest work. I was a tax officer, like I said earlier, in Germany, and I wouldn't want to go back. So I'm happy that I can do this for a living. So even if the footage.
That's a wonderful way to end it. When it all comes down to it, we love editing, right? We still love editing. Thank you all for joining us once again for editing.